Okay, a sole trader is the simplest form of business. It's where you've got one owner running and owning the business who faces unlimited liability. That means they're legally responsible for all of the debts of the business to an unlimited amount. In other words, the business goes bankrupt, the owner is responsible for all of the debt, even if it's more. Sole traders are usually financed by the owner's own capital or by borrowing from family members or friends. They can of course approach a bank for lending money, but that can be problematic if they're a new business. The main advantages of a sole trader are that the owner is running the business, so they're their own boss, they make all the decisions. Secondly, any profit they make is theirs to keep. They don't have to share it with anyone else. Finally, it's relatively easy to set up, and its disadvantages of a sole trader. The main disadvantage is obviously unlimited liability. You could lose everything if the business goes bankrupt. The advantage of making all the decisions is also a big disadvantage. There's great responsibility involved. And finally, it's difficult to raise a lot of capital if you're on your own and you haven't got a partner. A partnership is a more complex form of business. There are between 2 and 20 owners who also face unlimited liability. Examples of these are professional businesses such as doctors, lawyers, and so on. In terms of how they're financed, the additional partners bring capital to help provide more finance for the business. Bank loan is also another option. Advantages of a partnership: obviously you've now got an additional person to share ideas with, or persons I should say, and that can allow you to specialize in your particular area where you have expertise. You've got increased capital which is brought by the extra partners. You are also able to share responsibility with your partners. Disadvantages of a partnership: you still face unlimited liability, so if the business goes bankrupt with a lot of debt, you are liable for that. You can now have arguments or disagreements with your partners. Drawing up a deed of partnership, which is a legal document outlining important things like share of the profits according to the amount of hours worked and so on, can partly solve these problems. Obviously, the amount of capital you've got is. A private limited company is also known as an LTD. In the eyes of the law, an LTD exists in its own right and is separate from its owners, i.e. it's a separate legal body or entity. LTDs raise capital by selling shares privately, normally to family and friends. In terms of liability, for the first time, liability is limited. In other words, responsibility is only for the amount of money invested in the business. An LTD also has to register with the Registrar of Companies, where it places a memorandum and articles of association. If you look at the screen, there's details of that on the screen now. An LTD must also publish its annual audited accounts. In terms of advantages of an LTD, it faces limited liability, and it's also a separate legal entity, which I explained earlier. It can raise much more capital now because it can sell or issue shares. It still has the advantages of sharing the expertise of a number of people. Disadvantages of an LTD. It is more costly to establish an LTD. For example, the accounts have to be audited by a qualified accountant. Competitors can access the financial details of the business and use to their advantage. Those are available at Companies House. Also, LTDs need to consider their shareholders. They need to satisfy their shareholders. And of course, you can still get disagreements or arguments between the various shareholders and directors. And ultimately, at an AGM, directors can be replaced. The second type of company is a public limited company, or PLC. This is the same as an LTD, except shares can now be sold to the general public. This means much more capital can be raised. This company faces limited liability, and the company is a separate legal body, so the company is sued rather than the owners if something untoward happens. Over an LTD, a PLC does have to disclose more financial information, and costs are higher. The advantages of a PLC: the PLC faces limited liability and is a separate legal body. Probably the greatest advantage is the huge amounts of capital that can be raised potentially by selling shares through a flotation of the company. There is an enhanced media presence as well. The big disadvantages: the company is now vulnerable to takeovers if individuals can get hold of enough shares, they can take over the business. It's more costly to run, and certainly a flotation is a costly exercise. Greater financial disclosure also occurs, and shareholders do need to be satisfied and dividends paid.